Good evening, everyone. We'd like to thank you all for coming. We really are pleased to see such a nice turnout on a gorgeous, spectacular day out there. In addition to the group here in the room with us, we have a steadily growing group on Zoom. We had 25 people sign up on Zoom. We'll see if they all managed to make it or not. I also have to comment, just going into this, I was very excited coming into the parking lot of the library this afternoon, seeing the car actually plugged in using the new EV chargers there. So that was wonderful. First of all, I would like to thank all of you for coming, both those here in the room and the ones on Zoom. If we think we've got the tech all straightened out, but it wouldn't hurt if someone on Zoom would give us a comment in the chat or a thumbs up just to make sure you're hearing us okay. I'd also like to thank our partners in this. My name is John Zittel. I'm the co-chair of the Climate Action Commission. We have a number of other members of the Climate Action Commission in the room here. If you could just raise your hands and identify yourselves. If you have any questions about anything that we're doing, feel free to approach any of us. Partnering with us for this climate conversation series is, first of all, Patten Free Library, who have done just a wonderful job in hosting these events and helping us publicize, and the Kennebec Estuary Land Trust. That has also been instrumental in making these events happen, helping us with the tech, helping us with their mailing list, and just generally making these events more accessible to a wider audience. I do want to mention you'll find a variety of information items back on the rear table. There's a variety of handouts there. We'll encourage you to help yourself to any of those you like. You'll also find several different sheets that you can sign up or fill out as you see fit. There's a comment sheet there. We'd welcome any thoughts and comments you have, keeping in mind that we're nearing the end of this year's Climate Conversation series, and in only another couple of months, we'll probably start thinking about what next winter's series might look like. So if you have any suggestions or ideas of things you'd like to see us pursue, by all means, let us know. You'll also find just a sign-up sheet there. We'd welcome you to sign up just so we know who was here this evening, and capture your email address so that we can keep you informed of any future events. Finally, one of the projects that the Climate Action Commission sponsors is a window dressers volunteer event, which involves a lot of volunteer work. So we're actively looking for volunteers. We'd be pleased to have anyone that would be interested in volunteering. The volunteering will come in 2 phases. There will be a period through the mid to late summer when we'll be making the rounds to the houses of people that have signed up for window dressers inserts to make measurements, and then it'll all come together on a weekend in October when we'll actually be assembling all of those window inserts. So if you're interested in learning more about the event or interested in learning more about window dressers or in volunteering, please sign up on that sign-up sheet. This evening's talk is the next to the last talk in this winter's series. We'll have one more talk that'll be on the 10th of April when Nancy Sfera, who is the chair of the Forestry Committee here in Bath, will be giving a presentation on landscaping for climate resilience. This evening, our talk, as you see, is on demystifying renewable energy options. We'll be trying to cover a range of things there, everything from those postcards that you get in the mail, what do those things mean, to rooftop solar and probably a whole lot in between. We'll try to allow plenty of time for questions and discussion, and we will try to start wrapping up by about 6:45 so that we can be out the door and the library folks can close up the library promptly at 7. This evening's talk as I said, Demystifying Renewable Energy Options has been assembled and organized by Laura Walters here on my left, one of the members of our Climate Action Commission. Laura will make some introductory remarks, and then we'll introduce, I believe, two additional speakers that are part of the panel she's put together for this evening's event. So with no further ado, let me turn it over to Laura. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. I am just going to start sharing my screen over here now. Thank you so much for joining us here today to talk about really one of my favorite topics, which is solar energy or renewable energy. Like John said, my name is Laura Walters. I am a co-founder at a nonprofit called Remote Energy, where we work with different communities around the world and help them start up their own solar training programs in their communities. We do train the trainers programs, and so they can do workforce development in their country. So I live here in Bath, and I'm part of the Climate Action Commission. I'm really excited to be having a talk on solar here today. We've been getting lots of different questions about it. And please silence phones if you have them too. So although I've been in the solar industry for a lot of different years, I know it can be really confusing because there's a lot of different options for solar. There's different ways to pay for it. It just can be hard to figure out where you want to start. And so that's what our talk is going to be all about. Yay! All right, let me try to share my screen again and see if we can get back to where we were. Does that look good on the Zoom side of things? Nope, we gotta change the view. There's a lot of different things with this. All right, I think we're back in action there. Sorry about that delay. And so our other panelist is Chris Jones here. He is a clean energy consultant from Revision Energy, which is a solar installation company that is in Maine and in other parts of New England too. And he's going to be talking to us about the process for installing solar on your home or business. So then at the end, I'll jump back in, give you a quick summary, and then we'll have time for questions after that. So now that you know about us, I just wanted to do a quick show of hands. We can do it both in the chat in Zoom and also in the room here, just to figure out what your background is here. Are you a homeowner that's looking to possibly install solar? Are you a business owner and are looking for those type of options? Or are you a renter and you're wanting to learn about other options about solar? So I'll just have a quick raise of hands with those 3 different options. If you're a homeowner, first. Okay, so it looks like the majority of the room is homeowner. Business owner that might be looking for solar. Doesn't look like we have any of those. And then renters in the room. Okay, I think we've got a couple of renters. Okay, great. So I think this talk is going to be perfect for everyone here in this audience. So thank you for that. So I wanted to start out by talking about the 2 kind of approaches to solar. You could either have a solar installation done at your property. So this could be solar on your roof, or it could be my neighbors have a couple of pole mounts at their house where they're actually their electricity is a grid tied system. So this is the simplest type of system where they're producing their own power on their home, and then it's powering the loads in their house. And then when they're producing extra electricity, they're sending it back to the utility grid. And then on cloudy days or on the nights, then they're actually buying the energy back from the utility. And so it's a trading, it's called net energy billing. They're trading credits back and forth with the utility. The other type of solar option that's available or approach is off-site solar. And so there's this big solar system right here on the left-hand side of the screen. And that might be your community solar option or your utility provided solar. And so somewhere off-site, not on your location, there's going to be a large solar system. There's benefits to that because you don't have an installation at your house. You can have reduced costs of that system because it's a much larger system. And then there are ways that we as homeowners or people interested in solar can buy into a bigger system like that. So our speakers are going to talk about those different options in a lot more detail. I wanted to quickly talk just from a homeowner's perspective. When I bought my house about 7 years ago, I decided to install a solar system first. And this is not typically what I would recommend, to do a solar installation as your first task on your home. But I did it because of some of the solar policies and changes that were happening at that time in 2017. Usually I would say, hey, if you're wanting to do something for the environment, a lot of times it's best to start out with efficiency first. Do energy efficiency in your home. You can work on doing insulation in your home, make your home a lot more efficient first. And so you're using less energy, which means you don't have to have as large of a solar system in order to provide that energy. So it will save you money in a lot of different ways. But of course, I didn't do that. We got a solar system installed on our house because I was so excited about it. A couple of the reasons I wanted it was energy independence. I wanted to reduce my carbon emissions, and solar was a great way to do that. When we were looking at the house, one of the things that we were looking for was, is this a good site for solar? So our roof was a bit newer. It was less than 10 years old. So that was a good thing. You wouldn't have to, sometimes if your roof is older, you might have to re-roof your house before installing the solar, because that solar system is going to last about 30 years plus. And so you want to make sure that you think about that beforehand when you're installing a system. Other couple of things that I was thinking about with my house was it was facing south. So when you're facing south, southeast, our house is, that's really good to get the most solar gain out of your system. And there were no obstructions. And so we didn't have trees around in front of the house that could be shading our solar system. And there weren't a lot of vents on the southern side of my roof. So those were some of the things that I was just quickly thinking about with doing my solar installation. And the process was, I got a couple of quotes from different companies. It's interesting when you get quotes from different companies, they may have different equipment that they're bidding out with the system, and they might actually have a slightly different size system. And so when you get multiple quotes, it can be difficult to actually compare apples to apples, to compare one quote to another. And so a good way to do this is cost per watt, that's shown over on the side over there. And so you can take the whole cost of the quote that you get for a system, say if it's $10,000, and then you'll also see a size of your system. So it might be a 3 kilowatt system. And so that would be 3,000 watts. That's the amount of power that system is sized for. And you can just do a quick division with the cost divided by the wattage of the system, the size of your system, and that will give you a cost per watt. That's a way that it's kind of bringing you both the cost and the size of the system down to the simplest piece. And so you can easily compare multiple quotes that might be different sizes. So that's a good just little tip hint when you're looking at different quotes from systems. And then the installation process is pretty simple. It only took them a couple of days. They didn't come into the house very much. They were mainly on the roof doing the installation and in the basement working on the electrical connections to the service panel. So overall, that was kind of the process for us. The system got inspected afterwards, and then we started getting our bills looked a little different from CMP because they were not only showing our electricity usage, but they were also showing our electricity generation, so how much our solar system was generating. And then there's also tax credits. And so after that whole process, I had to work with the accountant to be able to get the solar tax credit for the system. So that's just a quick overview. We're going to get into more details about solar installations on the home. But then the other side of things is community solar. And so since my system was installed 7 years ago, I've done some of those energy efficiency improvements, but I've also switched over. I had an oil boiler before, and I switched over to heat pumps. So that's really increased my electricity usage because I'm not using that oil anymore. And I also recently just got a used EV. And so those two things have bumped my electricity usage up. And so now I'm in the process of, I want all of my electricity to be produced by renewable energy. And so I'm in the process of looking at community solar as a possibility to make up that difference. And I found it a little more difficult. There's a lot of different companies out there. You don't get a lot of information up front to be able to compare different companies, or that's what I've found. It usually is a pretty short application online where you put in your information like a utility bill, and then they come back to you with the size of the system and how much that would cost. You have to wait. I'm in a waiting process right now for a system to be available to come online. And so I'm really excited, like giving you a little bit of that background information there. I'm really excited to see what our panelists here have to say today, to maybe get some more information from them about these different types of systems for you all, and also how to maybe navigate this whole process as a homeowner, as a renter. So first up, we are going to see if Zoom will be friendly to us right now. It looks like my internet connection is a little unstable still, but hopefully we'll be able to get this to work. And I'm going to bring up Elizabeth Dupree to be able to start sharing her presentation. Elizabeth, are you able to share now?
Okay, yeah, can you hear me all right? All right,
Yes.
I will start sharing my screen here. And we practiced this before the webinar, so I'm hoping it will cooperate with us. All right, I'm just gonna move here, and there we go. So yeah, I'm Elizabeth Dupree. I work at the main office of the Public Advocate, which is a part of the state of Maine government. Our website is maine.gov/MVOPA. The Office of the Public Advocate speaks for and advocates for utility ratepayers. You may have heard of the Public Utilities Commission, We do a lot of work there, speaking out for ratepayers when policies and rate increases and things like that come across their desk at the PUC. We also advocate at the legislature and on the regional and national level. We also work one-on-one with folks. So you're welcome to give us a call anytime. We provide advice, information, and resources about utility matters. And so I'm so thankful to be here with you all today to talk a little bit about something that our office gets quite a lot of calls about. So what is community solar? It is a program that's just a few years old here in the state of Maine, designed by the Maine State Legislature to promote the expansion of solar production in the state. The eligible solar projects receive credits for each kilowatt hour of electricity that they generate, and you and I are subsidizing those credits through our electric bills. So if you see on your CMP bill where they talk about public policy costs, it's like average, I think, $8 a person. That's a lot of that money is going towards promoting more solar energy in the state. Customers like you and me can sign up to receive a share of those credits generated by the project. And the project can be located anywhere in the service territory of your utility. So they may not necessarily be nearby, but as long as they're part of like the CMP territory, then you can sign up with them. A lot of the time, people will sign up with community solar projects online, like Laura mentioned, or often there are door-to-door salespeople, or sometimes people will exhibit at fairs, things like that. How does it work? So understanding the community solar program kind of comes down to understanding your bill, your normal CMP bill right now. I'm showing you a picture of mine. Basically, if you see here, there's two pieces of your bill that make up the total. There's the CMP livery with the poles and wires and stuff. And then there's the non-CMP supplier, which is the electricity from the power plants and dams and stuff. And those two pieces come together to make your complete bill. How CMP determines what each of those are going to cost is based on your usage. So if you're purchasing solar credits from the solar company, if you're purchasing the right amount, that cancels out your usage. So all of a sudden your CMP bill goes from my $86 here down to the minimum of around a little over $20. And then you often will receive a second bill from the solar company. And there is a billing lag of 45 to 60 days. So like the credits that you receive from the solar company, now you'll be billed for a couple months from now. So it's a little bit more complicated than our normal electric bill. And that can be a little frustrating for folks just because it's so new to try to understand, like, am I saving money? You can't compare this month's bill with this month's solar bill because they don't line up time-wise. And then, you know, like Laura mentioned, another thing that sometimes people can feel frustrated about is it can take some time. I mean, we've talked to folks that it's 3 or 4 years later before their solar project comes online, just due to sometimes it just takes a long time to construct things in Maine and also to connect to the grid. So how much does it cost? Instead of the big upfront cost of putting solar panels on your roof, you are paying every month a little bit to your solar subscription company. So basically you're getting that $20 CMP bill, and then you're paying for the credits in a second bill. Between those two bills over the course of the year, if you purchase the right amount of solar credits to cover your usage, you generally will save 10 to 15% compared to what your normal CMP would have been. And so we say over the course of the year, because a lot of the time these solar companies will allocate extra credits to you in the summer when the fields are producing more. It's light out from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. So the fields are going really hard in the summer. And then you use those extra credits towards your bill in the winter when the fields are not producing quite as much, because as you noticed, we're not getting quite as much sunshine. So you can't compare month to month, apples to apples. A lot of people might expect their $100 bill to be $85 every month, and they're just expecting that 15% savings, and it doesn't quite work the way that they might expect. It's a little bit more complicated. Will you be using green power? Probably not. I mean, these solar fields are designed to add more green power to the energy that we're all using in the CMP service territory. So some of the mix that's getting uploaded to the grid for us all to use is green, but you're just using the same mix that everybody else is using. Your community solar provider is not your supplier. If you want to use only solar energy, you got to do like Laura, put some solar panels on your roof. If using renewable energy is important to you, you should make sure that your solar company is transferring the renewable energy credits or RECs that correspond with the kilowatt hour credits to you. Most of these solar companies don't do that. Most of them sell these RECs to other, companies and stuff. So probably you're promoting green power broadly in the state, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you are personally using green power. If you are interested in RECs, there is another program here in the state that's operated by the Public Utilities Commission, and it's called Maine Green Power. It provides Versant and CMP customers with the option to purchase those RECs that we talked about, basically to balance out, the fossil fuel energy that you're using with promoting, other green projects. So it just gets added to your normal CMP bill. There's different levels that you can purchase. You can see, I don't know if y'all can see the slide, but like 250 kilowatt hours is about $5 a month. The average Maine household uses 500 kilowatt hours. That would be around $9 a month. 1,000 kilowatt hours is $17.90. megreenpower.com is where you can see all those different rates and learn more about this program. Like I said, it's a program of the Public Utilities Commission. Or you're welcome to call 747-2414 or email info@megreenpower.com. So that's my brief overview. I'm very, very happy to take any questions, either now or later. My email address and phone number right here on the screen, so reach out anytime. And I'm gonna stop sharing and swap over to the next panelist here.
Excellent. And I think we'll, just because of Zoom, we'll try to hold the questions to the end, and we'll have Chris come up and give his presentation, and then you'll have plenty of time to ask all of your questions. Is that working, or are we sharing screen? There we go. There you go. Now you're set.
All right. Good to see everybody. Thanks so much to Laura and the gang at the library for having me here on behalf of Provision. My name's Chris. I don't know who that guy was in the picture earlier, but he's another solar professional somewhere in the world named Chris Jones, slightly more handsome than me. Yeah, I've been with Provision for, geez. Oh,
Sneak in here just for a second. Scott. Now you're good.
Great. I've been with Provision for about 7 years now, and mostly I consult with homeowners and business owners about their opportunities to complete the renewable energy transition, but I also get to spend a lot of time in settings like this, helping to spread the good word. And really, it's one of my favorite things to do, short of being on the roof. I'll briefly mention Revision. Obviously, this isn't a sales pitch, but I think if you were to check out our website, you'd find out that, we're a pretty special company doing some pretty special work here in Maine and New England at large. We're a B corporation. That's a designation that many people don't even know about, but it's sort of like the business world equivalent of having your organic stamp. We're also employee owned, and by all means, come and find me afterwards if you'd like a business card. I'm more than happy to help get someone to your house to look into your options with you. So there's been a lot of great information already, and I'm sure some of what I'm about to say is a bit redundant, but I'll do my best to omit those parts. First, a little bit about the why. I mean, come on, we all know at this point that climate change is real. To deny that would be to be sticking your head in the sand. I always like to show this slide, we here in Maine actually have a pretty significant carbon debt relative to other states, and that's because most of us still heat with oil. Yeah, most of us still heat with oil, and at least heretofore we've had cold winters, although perhaps that won't be the case for much longer. I mean, gosh, it snowed once this year, for heaven's sake. But nonetheless, as I said, a big carbon debt here in Maine. We've got to work cut out for us. How do we, in general, sort of start to correct matters as best we can? Well, really three pathways: make appliances more efficient, decarbonize the production of electricity, right? So as the co-panelist said just a moment ago, we all basically, unless you have your own solar system, you are buying energy from the grid, just this big bucket of power, if you like. And the vast majority of that here in Maine, as well as in other states, is produced by natural gas. So to decarbonize, the power that is coming to us all the time is important. And then lastly, just, switching fuels, as in, making our appliances and whatnot run on different fuels besides fossil. Does that mean that you have to pursue a lifestyle like this, pleasant as that though that may be? Well, not necessarily. There's other options. You could pursue what we call the 100% solar household. Another way to look at this would be net zero, a term I'm sure you've all heard before. But basically what we're talking about is microphone with you. I'm just trying not to wander quite so much. I'll just stay right here. Sorry, everyone in Zoom lands, that you missed some important stuff. So basically what that means is, pivoting as much to as great an extent as possible your home's energy uses away from fossil fuel towards electricity. That's going to vary from homeowner to homeowner, especially if it's a new construction situation. But by and large, we're talking about heat pumps, electric hot water, in some cases batteries, hopefully soon, in many cases, electric vehicles, and then producing as much of that electricity as you can yourself with a solar array somewhere. Laura talked about offsite and onsite, and we'll certainly talk about that as well. Here's an example CMP bill. This one's a little bit old, I'm afraid to say, but as you can see, just as my co-presenter was saying on the left there, really two parts to the bill: the delivery, that's the cost of the infrastructure, and then the supply, that's the electricity itself. Again, the majority of us consume electricity from CMP's standard offer, which is mostly natural gas derived. The third component I would highlight to you is the minimum charge. You can see it here sort of in the top right, the $13.66 for the first 50 kilowatt hours. Now, as I said, this is an old bill, so that cost has gone up substantially. It's now $21.91 each month to be grid tied, if you like. And that is the one charge that no amount of solar will offset. But should you pursue a solar investment of some kind, you'll start to see, as what was her name? Elizabeth. As Elizabeth said, you'll start to see credits build up, net metered credits. It's important to note that if you have a solar investment, the power you produce never loses its value. If you share the surplus electricity at times of peak sunshine with the utility, that power is applied to your bill at full value. Right now, CMP is charging us 19 cents per kilowatt hour. That's what your solar kilowatt hours are worth as well. Your solar power never loses value here in Maine. It's an incentive that many states don't have, and that's it certainly makes going solar here in Maine very easy. So there's an example there on the left of a chart from the CMP bill of somebody who has gone solar. So again, usage, that's what you're consuming from the grid. Generation, that's what you're sending back to them. Banked generation, that's the surplus credits that you mostly amass throughout the summertime, and then those credits are applied to your bill in the winter when we, as Elizabeth said, when we don't tend to produce quite as much up on the roof. Those credits expire after 12 months. So with that in mind, we need to keep two numbers in our heads when we're designing your solar options, like how much do you consume throughout the course of the year and how much can you make on your roof or where have you. As long as those two are lining up, again, you'll reduce your bill just down to that $21.91. And you can track your production all the year long by virtue of app-based monitoring, courtesy of the inverter. That's a little bit in the technical weedy side of things. To get back to options for solar investment off-grid, not very common. Most of us remain grid tied here in Maine, where again, historically, we've had cold winters. It would be, I would say, prohibitively expensive to, have, heat your home entirely with, solar and batteries and whatnot. Off-grid is not a very flexible lifestyle. It's pretty expensive up front. We don't do an awful lot of that work. I think the far more common approach is grid tied. Again, that's where you're taking advantage of the net metering policy. Every state has one. Here in Maine, it's very, very consumer friendly, which comes as a surprise, but it's true. And then lastly, grid tied with battery backup. We'll talk more about this later, but in the state of Maine today, all that a battery really does for you is take the place of a generator. And so most of us, therefore, might not specifically need a battery. But again, grid tie with battery backup is the best of both worlds. You can share credits with the grid when you need to. And when the grid is down because there's a storm and trees fell on the lines, then all of a sudden you can back yourself up, or at least your critical loads throughout the house. A few highlights regarding solar installs. In my experience, I would say that most homeowners install between 20 to 25 panels for between $25,000 to $30,000. By and large, you'll see that if it were a cash investment, you'll see that pay for itself in less than 10 years, which means that you've got, let's see, it's a little bit further down. You can see the warranty period for a solar panel is 25 years. So if you pay yourself off in 10, that means you've got 15 years at least of free electricity. And financing is certainly a possibility. Really, there's two ways to look at the investment. You can pay with cash up front. And again, in that case, you're thinking about how many years will it be so that investment pays itself off. On the other hand, you could choose to finance the system the same way you might finance a car or a house. And if that's your calculation, you want to be thinking about, okay, well, how many dollars was I spending out the door prior to going solar on my CMP bill? And now how much is my solar loan? If those two things line up, then, why not, right? Why not go solar if that's the case? And rest assured, that's always possible. As everybody I'm sure knows, interest rates right now are a little bit weird, but nonetheless, we can pair you with the right option. Currently, it's not possible to lease solar equipment in the state of Maine. I expect that will change as the years go on. Currently not an option. The federal tax credit, 30%. That's Uncle Sam's contribution towards your investment. It's a meaningful one, and that is in place unless the legislation changes, which I find somewhat unlikely. That's in place until the end of 2033. No state incentive in Maine. There is a saying that there's no rebate check, but again, our net metering policy, I would argue, is an incentive in some way. And we're looking for a big square roof space as opposed to, say, a hipped roof, which can be a bit challenging to fit square solar panels on. A nice big square roof space, 35 by 12, that's ideal. As Laura said, you certainly do want to have your building facing south-ish as best as possible. A roof pitch, generally in the Northern Hemisphere, you want your roof pitch to be about 10, 12 or so, 35 degrees thereabouts. That'll get the best exposure year-round as the sun's position in the sky changes. Basically, all roof types work well with solar, with the exception of some corrugated metal and slate, though that's very uncommon. And currently about 400 watts per panel, give or take, good warranty protection, and exceptional lifespan. Very, very durable equipment indeed. Solar panel is an aluminum frame, tempered glass on top of the cells, very, very rugged stuff. Oops. Here's the array or arrays at the home of a colleague of mine. I always like to show this picture. I think it's a nice picture, but also you can see how really the aesthetics of solar panels have improved over the years. I mean, now you typically see this all black aesthetic, which to me almost looks like a sheet of obsidian. It really does look pretty slick. And if you'll notice on the upper array there, we've got a combination of panels in landscape and portrait, which is very, very common. One thing I'll mention is that in many towns in the state of Maine, up to including this town, there are setback codes that need to be obliged when you permit a solar project. And I'm not kidding you, you'll end up forfeiting quite a bit of space on your roof in order to oblige these codes. And so concerned citizens who want to make sure that they can maximize their roof space are well advised to speak to their code enforcement office ahead of time, or perhaps form a group to make sure that that office knows, hey, we need to prioritize renewable energy advancement. I can tell you more about that afterwards if you like, but rest assured, Bath is one of the towns enforcing these setback codes. Now, if your roof is shaded or perhaps, facing east-west, or for whatever reason, you don't like the look of solar, but you happen to have a big backyard, you could consider a ground-mounted system. This is in Brunswick, very, very large. Most homeowners aren't going to need a ground-mounted system quite this big. But in any case, you sort of get an idea as to what that might look like. Always more expensive up front. You do have to pay for two things that don't occur with a roof-mounted system. One, you have to build a robust racking system to take the place of the roof. And then second of all, you have to trench or excavate power back to the point of interconnection. So more expensive upfront to be sure, but again, this is a better fit for some people. Now, some people, oh, sorry, before I say that, this is always something I like to highlight to folks. Here we have Zillow, a third-party like real estate aggregator, is making it clear that solar is something that can improve the resale value of the home. It's a question we get a lot, and I like to show this as it's obviously not biased towards the industry. It's certainly compelling to see that, effectively the net cost, or what you paid after the tax credit, is more or less the amount that you could expect to be added to the resale value of the home. Now, some folks live in a condo where solar panels aren't allowed, or perhaps they rent, or for whatever reason just can't make the investment. Well, those folks could consider community solar. You've heard about one type of community solar, that's a subscription variety. Another variety is what Revision can offer, and that's ownership-based community solar. And in that case, you in fact will, either with cash or a financing plan, you will buy a share of one of these farms that we build up front. And in that case, as opposed to just say a discount of 10 to 15%, you can in fact offset the entirety of your bill, except for, again, that $21.91 connection fee. And this is a great fit, again, for who? Well, let's see. Renters, condo owners, small business owners, buildings with shaded or obstructive roofs, folks who are planning to move to another home in Maine, or at least in central Maine power territory within the next few years, folks who don't like the way solar looks, and that's perfectly valid. Maybe your roof has structural issues. Maybe your shingles are, less than, maybe your shingles have 9 years of life left, which doesn't mean you need to replace them today, but it means that you'd probably want to replace them before going solar. So that's a good fit. Basically, anybody who might not find it the best fit for them to put solar on the property could easily consider making an investment in ownership solar. Again, you own a share of this asset. This asset is, owned by an LLC. The LLC is comprised of members, folks like you who live in Maine. You're eligible for the federal tax credit, certainly greater long-term savings. You can move the share from one place to the next. I would say that, subscription solar is really, there's no such thing as bad solar. We want more renewable energy to be penetrating the grid, of course. And saving a little bit of money is nice, without question. I think it's a great step one. Folks with more of an appetite to invest might consider option B, but really they're both good options. I'll quickly talk about home electrification. I'm sure a lot of this will be familiar. I'm sure at least one person in here has a heat pump water heater at this point, right? So we talked about, electrifying the home. This is one of the simplest ways to do so and to save a whole bunch of money. And in fact, as you can see, on top of the storage vessel, on top of the storage tank, is a condenser. So as you're making your domestic hot water for your baths and showers and laundry and what have you, you're in fact dehumidifying your basement. And that means that's generally a good thing in New England, where basements, I can tell you, tend to be dank. You get an $850 rebate from the state for this investment. Really just low-hanging fruit. Everybody should have these. I saw a number of hands go up, so I'm thinking that several folks in the room would agree. Perhaps we'll get some comments towards the end as to how these have worked for people. Heat pumps for space heating and cooling, obviously very popular at this point. Sounds like Laura had some already. Same deal, you've got a condenser and another sort of indoor fan unit. What's happening here is a refrigerant cycle. These appliances are therefore much more efficient than, say, an oil boiler. They have a coefficient of performance of 200%. That's a ratio of electricity in to BTUs out. So just superior equipment to heat and cool your home with. And there's a variety of options in terms of both the indoor units and outdoor unit size, so on and so forth. But again, pretty common at this point. Exceptionally good rebate potential from the state today. Most of us can get a rebate from Efficiency Maine upwards of $4,000 to make a heat pump investment. So, and Uncle Sam as well will give you a $2,000 tax credit. So both state and federal governments are underwriting this, again, superior equipment. Battery backup. So important to note, we've talked about the net metering policy already, right? Where you're sharing credits with the grid. That's basically like treating the grid as a battery for free. You produce surplus power. It's stored virtually within your account and then applied to your account at times of a solar deficit. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. I would also mention that here in Maine today, our residential ratepayers do not have time of use rates. It is the same cost for your electricity at noon as it is at midnight. So there's no incentive, therefore, in like storing grid power in a battery at night and then running your home off that appliance during the day, right? Because it's the same cost. So again, with those two reasons in mind, the only reason to have a battery like the Tesla Powerwall, for example, is to take the place of a generator. Having said that, in Maine, I mean, does anybody here live in Harpswell? Okay, well, from what I understand, they lose power there quite a bit at the end of a transmission line. And this provides an opportunity for you to store a portion of your solar production. And then when the power goes down, you can run your fridge, certain water heaters, certain types of heat, lights, outlets, critical loads, perhaps even more than that, you can run with a battery, which is quiet, automatic, easy to use with an app. It truly is superior to the generators we're all familiar with, which are noisy, require maintenance, and require fuel. In this case, the sunshine's the fuel. I'm also pleased to say that there's options today that aren't Tesla. Many folks have a Tesla objection. And then, of course, electric vehicles are now becoming far more common as well. It was cool to see the chargers outside the library here. Here's a couple of other varieties of car chargers and electric vehicles. Man, does anyone see the Rivian? Holy smokes, are those cool trucks. Wow. And, in a broader sense, there's a lot of work to do besides at the residential level. Really, renewable energy, as we all know, is variable. It's not always windy. It's not always sunny. And so to decarbonize the grid and pivot to renewable energy, another big part of the puzzle will be grid scale storage, other fuel sources. Some folks even think nuclear will be a part of the plan moving forward. One thing I like to talk about is fleet deployment. If we had a whole, 20 bus fleet for schools, right? Those buses are used, 2 times a day for about an hour, and then they sit in the parking lot. If those buses are, electric and have a giant battery in them, then geez, somebody could just flip the switch when everybody's running their air conditioner in the middle of the summer, pull power from that fleet so that we don't have to turn on some fossil fuel peaker plant somewhere and then turn that back off when the demand has subsided. So all sorts of interesting ways in which we'll be able to pivot to renewable energy. But again, this is certainly stuff that you can do as well at your home. And if you want to learn more about your options, by all means, track me down after we're done with the Q&A. This is in Bath. This is a really cool project. Doesn't that look great? I can't remember the name of the street though. Anyway, that's it. Here's my contact info, folks. And I think we're gonna do the Q&A portion next.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. We just got a lot of information, y'all. I think just to do a quick summary here, so when you're thinking about solar, you can do that option of doing solar on your house. And when you're looking at doing solar on your house, you're going to be thinking about how do you want to pay for it? That's really your next question. Are you wanting to pay upfront for it? And if you do that, then you are going to be able to have a lot more savings over time. You'll have more of a payback period, like Chris had said. And so your system will produce enough electricity that over a certain amount of time, you might have a 5 or 7 year payback period. And then all the electricity you're producing afterwards is going to be basically free electricity. If you do a program where you do something like a loan or something like that, you're going to be paying in smaller amounts over time. And so it's almost just like you're paying your regular electricity bills. And then on the community side, we heard about, from Elizabeth, we heard about solar subscription services. And then we heard about another option that's pretty cool too, with the ownership model that from Chris over here for the community solar options. And so that's almost like a combination of the both. You're able to almost buy a portion of that community solar system as it's kind of your own system part. And so you're going to be thinking about how you're going to be paying for them. And then there is also that main green power option that's just through your utilities. So I think with that, after you make some of those decisions, go through that process, then it's just about contacting people. There is a website called Energy Sage, which is basically like a solar marketplace. And so it's trying to be kind of like Yelp is for the solar industry, where you can go on there and they people review different solar companies. They rate different solar companies. There's not a lot because solar isn't that huge yet. And so, but you will find different consumer reviews of different companies and information. They kind of try to make it. And so it's easy to digest, easy to understand one system next to another. And they both talk about installing systems on your home and also community solar options. So that could be a good recommendation. There is a resource sheet at the back that has the website for that too. So with that, I would say there's no really one-stop solution. That's why solar is kind of confusing and complex. It's your decision really based on a lot of factors. Some could be financial, some could be wanting that energy independence. But no matter what, there is an option for you. So I think with that, we can open it up to questions for either Elizabeth or Chris, and we can answer any of the questions that you've come here with today. Yeah.
Yeah, Elizabeth talked primarily about the subscription model.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of wondering, is there any regulation on how they price their product? Because it's basically an interaction between an individual and the solar farm private owner.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads to my second part of my question is where Chris was talking about shared community solar. I'm wondering there if you have a city or a county or the state interested in some wholly or partially owned solar farm by themselves and passing those savings on to their citizens. Isn't that a more attractive option?
All right, so I'm going to repeat that question there for Elizabeth. So Elizabeth, the first part of the question was about community solar subscriptions, and are there regulations at all for the cost of community solar? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. There actually are not very many regulations on the community subscription solar at all. It's wild to think about it because our normal electric system is so heavily regulated, but there's really not that many rules around the community solar program. Most of them have to do with the contracts and canceling. There's a 5-day rule where you have 5 days after you get your first bill from the solar company to cancel and only be responsible for that first bill. After that, it could take up to 90 days. Or I had one company, it took them 6 months to fully cancel your contract and you'd be billed in the meantime. So there's that 5-day rule, and there's not a whole lot else for regulation. So it's really between you and the company and that contract that you set with them that decides how much you're going to be paying.
Okay, and then for the second part of the question, it was about maybe in the community solar investment option, and if there are towns or cities that come together to do any of the investments and then use that with their communities to offer deals.
I was supposed to stay here. What you're, I think, describing is what's known as a power purchase agreement, where you have a developer who, pays for the cost of constructing this large solar array, and then a separate off-taker, right? So, it's very common, for example, I mean, we've built arrays for, for the city of Portland, for example, we built an array on an old landfill in the city, and that power offsets the consumption at several municipal buildings, Merrill Hall among them, Merrill Auditorium, excuse me. So that's a common approach. That's, again, the power purchase agreement where one party pays for the construction, takes the tax incentives, and another party would take the cheaper electricity rate. I don't know that it's something you'd see all that often between like everybody in a town necessarily. It sounded like what you were thinking. Have I got that right? Like
yeah, I'm just thinking about the purchasing power that one would have if you had a larger body of people.
I think ultimately that's why our model works so well. Effectively what we do is we gather a list of folks who are willing to, make this investment. And once we can, once that chunk of people and their needs for electricity lines up with one of the projects we're developing, then, we form the LLC And then now there's 200 more Mainers who are getting all of their electricity consumption from this one community-held asset somewhere in CMP territory. So that's, sounds like similar to what you're describing. There's other ways as well of, these large assets being built. Who pays? Who takes the incentives? That can oftentimes be more commercial and institutional than necessary residential.
One more thing that I would add to that too, there is something called like a Solarize campaign. And so we had one in Bath a number of years ago. It wasn't very big at that time, but it's kind of where usually one installation company will come in and work with a big community to try to get a lot of installations to happen at once and use some of that purchasing power. Like everyone's coming together, we can get better deals on all of these, the equipment, the solar panels, the inverters, that kind of stuff, because there's a big group of people who are wanting to purchase it at the same time. And so that was done a lot in the past, but we've kind of talked about that in the Climate Action Commission a little bit to see if we would want to do something like that in Bath too again. Julie, I think you had a question?
I had a comment on the question about the community-wide benefit, like everyone participating, but Bath is working with provision guy to put solar on our landfill. A portion of that is capped off, and there is benefit down the line for citizens because when we're getting offset at the city, like 50% of our electricity is being offset by the solar. The citizens should see that tax burden be relieved in some way, or at least energy savings according to a different fund to be used for other purposes. So there is like downstream benefits for citizens. But yeah, that would be pretty clever to be able to come together with a larger group of citizens and find this giant piece of land to accommodate all of our kilowatt hour usage and offset it like that collectively. But to start that.
Yeah, just to quickly repeat that for our Zoom folks, we are actually getting solar installed on our landfill here in Bath, and it's going to be producing electricity for the city-run buildings. And so there's going to be some trickle-down effects for citizens of Bath too from that solar installation. That's pretty exciting. Yes.
So it sounds like there's no directed effort to find land, like areas where you could go like and talk to some landowner who is not doing it. And this is rural central here. There's a lot of land that is not put to any use. Is there any effort, either at the county level or state level, to incentivize landowners to offer their land, or get some kind of like tax break to put a solar farm on their ground?
Chris, would you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So, I appreciate your point. It is a big state with a lot of empty space, a lot of that being woodland, of course. I think, having said that, it's important that solar systems, large ones, are sited thoughtfully. There's a lot of folks doing important work out there today to make sure that certain habitats aren't disturbed, certain migratory patterns aren't disturbed. So there's a lot of nuance to what you're proposing. I can tell you that when we build large arrays, regardless of who the off-taker is, regardless of who's getting the benefits of this cheap electricity, our development team is looking for basically farmland that is no longer viable for farming, and we've been able to find farmers out there who've said, yes, I like this. This is a good legacy for me, myself and my family farm. This land that I can't use, it's no longer viable for farming. Now I can put it to good use. So that's certainly quite common. It would be reckless of me to say too much about what the state is doing to do that in general. Elizabeth might have some comments for us. I think that, what you're hinting at is so true. I mean, as we said earlier, we need to make like the electricity coming out of that socket right now needs to be powered by renewables, not by fossil fuels. And, I think the Public Utilities Commission and, you know, the utilities themselves need to also get involved in like making their mixture, you know, more renewables based. And that's obviously like a broad effort with a lot of different input. And, you know, I don't see that problem being solved all that quickly, quite frankly. But responsible folks like you and me can certainly do what we can to make sure that, you know, the land that's available is used thoughtfully for renewables. And that's certainly efforts that we make.
Yeah, Chris, I agree. I'm not familiar with any state programs that incentivize the landowners. I think that there's a lot of money to be made for the subscription solar companies, and they can compensate the landowners appropriately due to that. I think that's kind of the idea.
Paul?
Yeah, a couple of questions. One, I'm just curious why solar subscription approach is 10-15% cheaper. And if it is, why isn't everybody going that route? And secondly, I just wanted to find out, understand better what the difference is between main green power and a solar subscription.
Elizabeth, did you hear that?
Yeah, I think so. The first question was, why is it 10 to 15%? And if that's the case, then why are we not all doing it? So 10 to 15% just seems to be something that the industry settled on. It's totally up to these companies what type of discount they're willing to offer their subscribers, and that just is the prevailing trend. There are a lot of reasons it may not be the best fit for everybody, where we talked about some of these higher bills in the summer. Not everybody has the wiggle room in their budget to be able to accommodate those higher summer bills from the subscription. So sometimes if folks are on a fixed income or just don't have a bunch of money in savings to throw at a $400 electric bill in the summer, that's not always the best fit. It also can be a little complicated to be getting these two separate bills for your electric. Sometimes people don't enjoy that. There's a lot of different factors. So I think that it's a very individual basis if it's a good fit for you or not. I think that the idea is that if you're interested, I would say read your contract extremely closely, extremely carefully. Sometimes we hear stories here in the office of some of the sales folks who may have misunderstood part of the program or may have misrepresented it. It's just, I would just say, make sure you know exactly what you're getting into before you sign up, but it can be a good fit for some people. And then the other question was, how is Maine Green Power different from subscription solar? So Maine Green Power has nothing to do with the usage on your electric bill the way that rooftop solar and subscription solar would. You just get your normal electric bill that you always would get, and then you choose to pay extra towards Maine Green Power to kind of offset the fossil fuel usage that took place to provide you with the power. So you're getting these renewable energy credits to promote, these green projects in the state to kind of balance your karma for the, fossil fuel based electricity that most of us are using.
Can I chime in about
Yes,
that?
please.
So yeah, renewable energy certificates, or RECs as they're commonly referred. Every megawatt hour of solar is equivalent to one REC, or renewable energy certificate. And there's a value to these on the market, as Elizabeth has just explained. Now, if you were to have a solar array on your property, you can in fact, choose to receive compensation for those quarterly. And basically a portion of your solar system, the inverter, and I won't get into the details of what that does, but it's Wi-Fi enabled, and you can have the data report to a third-party aggregator that will send you a check once a quarter for the value of your renewable energy certificates. Now, it's a nuanced proposition, because what effectively is happening is you're in some ways letting a large utility or a large corporation off the hook sort of easily, right? That basically what these RECs that are being purchased means, like GM, for example, could purchase a certain number of RECs in order to satisfy that state's renewable energy standard, right? And so in some ways, some people choose to in fact not sell their RECs because they think that that's doing their part to not let large polluters off the hook. 99% of our customers do choose to sell their RECs. That whole marketplace is a financial instrument that was designed to make it easier for people to go solar. So again, most people do take that cash and, in that way drive down the payback of their investment. But again, a nuanced proposition that you might choose to learn more about before making your decision.
One more thing to add on to that is with Maine Green Power, it's not all about solar too. They have there's hydro, large scale hydro in that, and there's a lot of wind power and other types of renewables too.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Yes.
Regarding to the RECs, if you have a solar farm share, the owners of the shares also get those RECs, or is that still different pricing?
With a community solar farm, the ownership model, effectively, it would be too burdensome bureaucratically to try and meet those out to the various members of the farm. So what in fact happens is that, annually the total number of RECs are sold, and then that value is applied to common costs of operating the farm, which are basically three: maintenance, insurance, and the lease payment to the landowner. So basically it helps to offset the annual maintenance costs of the farm. With community solar subscription based, it's in fact the developer who's receiving those REC benefits, as well as the tax incentives as well. So that's one of the reasons, quite frankly, why a subscription model is 15 to 20%, right? Is because it's a different way of paying for and receiving compensation for the construction of this asset.
Yeah.
We're back. Cost-wise, a solar array on your roof or buying a share of a solar. Because to your point, not everybody is able to. So how does it compare?
So we've got a question about cost for installing solar on the roof versus buying a share of a community solar farm. I think Chris is going to go for it first.
Yeah, so Laura made a great point during her remarks. Cost per watt is a very good tool for comparing one solar investment against another. Right now, I would, as someone who designs solar systems, I can tell you that 350-ish per watt is a good place to be in. Obviously, that dollar amount has, over the last decade, consistently dropped. There was a bit of a, blip during the pandemic, like with every other industry, but that number's gone down precipitously over the decades. And so a great tool to keep in your back pocket when you're comparing. I would say that the upfront costs of investing in a farm versus building a system on your property are equivalent. The only difference economically is that with a farm, ownership based, you will likely incur some sort of annual membership fee, as we talked about the ongoing expenses of keeping this community held asset running. And so you might, it's sort of equivalent to a condominium fee, quite frankly. In a condo, you own the condo but not what surrounds it, so you pay either once a month or once a year a condo fee. I would compare it to that. So upfront cost the same. Ownership based farm would have likely a one-time a year fee.
Yes.
Yeah, I question about the solar farm shares. So it's my understanding that the land is leased for the farm, and you have a share, and the share has value, and I also understand that the minimum amount of time that the solar farm will be in operation is 25 years for the contract.
It's sort of a unicorn thing. We're the only company at this point in Maine and New Hampshire who offer this. So I guess you've come to the right place. And the first lease period is for 25 years. That's fixed. Interesting to know that that's the same period of time that solar panels are warranted for. Quite frankly, I'm sure that's intentional. Years 26 through 30 is the first renewal. That's at the discretion of simply the members of the farm. So there will be a vote amongst the members of this LLC. Do we wish to keep receiving free electricity for the next 5 years? I can't imagine anybody would say no. And then years 31 to 35, and each 5-year increment after that, there's similar votes. But at that point, the landowner who's receiving the lease payment, he will be involved, he or she or they or what have you. So, you can, I think, predict on at least a 30-year lifespan. And it's a very nuanced thing, right? When I talk to folks about this, like sometimes I'm like, yes, I'm trying to convince you to invest in something that you'll never see. You can't go out and touch it, and it's several $1,000s. Like, it's a nuanced thing, to be sure. There's lengthy paperwork involved, but I mean, I can 100% guarantee that there's somebody in your neighborhood who's already done it. It's working for them. And again, you can reduce your electric bill to that minimum connection charge in the exact same fashion. And you can finance your shares as well.
Yeah.
This kind of been slightly covered by Chris earlier, but so the question was for homeowner rooftop solar, please discuss battery backup options and oversized panels and batteries and use the backup battery power in the evenings after sun has set.
Okay.
You certainly can, but as I said earlier, there's no reason to today. In fact, all you would be doing is aging your equipment prematurely, right? If we think about it like this, in California, someone could have a battery without solar at all, but they have demand charges there. They have time of use rates. So they might charge up the battery at night when grid power is expensive, when it's cheap. And then by day, they can cut the cord and just run off the battery. Now that battery is saving them money, right? By responding to times of day when grid power is more or less expensive. In Maine, again, it's the same rate all the day long. And we also know that when we send our surplus power back to the grid, they give us full value for it. So to answer that question, you can do that if you're determined to have as little interaction with CMP as possible. That would be the only reason. Ultimately, as I said a moment ago, it's basically today based on our electric policy. It's basically just a generator replacement. And so there wouldn't be any incentive to use it daily. And in fact, you'd just be, as I said, aging the equipment prematurely.
But the generator placement is a thing that.
Oh, yes. Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, absolutely.
Georgetown also.
I live in Portland, where it would not ever come in handy for more than half an hour at a time, which wouldn't make it worth the expense. Many of us live in places where power outages are far more frequent than that and far more disruptive. And so that needs to be the cost benefit analysis. How often will I use this equipment? And
especially with power, wind storms.
Oh yeah.
Happening.
All right, we have time for maybe one more question, I think, because we're getting close. Two. Okay.
We could start leaving by about 6:50.
Okay, just because they'll kick us out of the library. Yeah, go ahead.
Where do you go to find your options for a subscription, for Rex, for community solar? And where do you go to find? I mean, revisions here, so obviously your company, that's an option, but what?
So the question is, where do you go? How do you figure out what is available for subscription services and or ownership or whatever for different types of community solar? Elizabeth, do you want to try to take that first?
Yeah, so I would say that generally we advise folks to talk to their neighbors, talk to the town office, see which solar companies are operating in their area. And like I said, a lot of the time, these folks will set up information booths at community events as well. And then obviously, like Laura mentioned, just poking around on the internet. I think poking around on the internet can be a little bit tricky, where a lot of the time, people will leave reviews only if they have something bad to say. So you kind of look around and you're like, all these people look terrible. So I think that, part of it is it's such a new program and there's a lot of confusion about how it works and why it's so different from our normal electric bill. And so, I think that just learn as much as you can. I obviously would recommend maine.gov/MEOPA to learn about community solar options and Maine Green Power. And then talking to people like Chris and, seeing if what they say makes sense to you and makes sense for your family. But just make sure you read the fine print on everything, no matter what.
Yeah, so that maine.gov does have a list of all the different providers on there. And then the Energy Stage is another good one. That was actually a group that was developed independently by the Department of Energy to start looking at different solar groups. And so, yes, there might be some bad negative reviews because, like Elizabeth said, people do tend to do that. But the thing that I think is helpful is it will show you all the different companies out there too. And so you can start doing research on them. Yes.
If you buy a share in a solar farm, Is that transferable, for instance, in your will?
That's a great question.
Yeah, so the agreement you sign, it's not all that different from the agreement you would sign if you had panels on the roof. Yeah, an interconnection agreement, a net energy billing agreement. In this case, it's tied to your account number and to your meter number. And so if you moved somewhere else within the Central Maine Power territory, you could just transfer it to the new CMP account. You can transfer it to a new person. You can certainly will it to someone. It is very much a movable asset. It can be sold as well. That's a little bit less common, but someone might decide to for whatever reason, someone would want to leave Maine. I can't imagine such a thing. But if they did do that, then they could sell it basically for the net cost, right, subsequent to the tax credit.
So I thought there were two different ways that you could get involved with community solar, and one was to actually buy a share in a solar farm. So that's what I was trying to,
Yeah.
like putting thousands up front, but then I thought the other option was more like just a rental fee.
Yes.
Where you tell them what you're.
Well, right now you're renting your electricity from CMP every month.
Yeah, and that, so.
And what the community subscription,
I mean, I know some people invested thousands of dollars up front to buy a share, then it's more like they bought a farm together. You're an owner. It's a little different.
Mhm.
yeah, totally. With the subscription model, you're choosing, let's compare it to apartment hunting, right? You can choose to rent this apartment over here that's, kind of crummy and run down, but like also kind of expensive and it's in a weird part of town. That's CMP, okay? And then, well, no, totally not. On the other side of things, you could say, oh, well, this apartment over here, which I'll pay for each month, it's cleaner, it's neater, and it's 10 to 15% less expensive. So that's like basically what you're doing when you're choosing which subscription, or which energy supply at all to buy, But buying into it is a different thing altogether.
Ask a question about buying. So winter time versus summer, I'm using about half the amount of power. If I am buying or if I'm renting from a company, are you renting a share at a certain value and then sometimes you meet that and sometimes you don't? Or is it like a base rental fee and then your usage is above that? And the same with purchasing. If you purchase more than you're actually using, how does that work?
Who wants to tackle that first? Because we've got a couple more minutes before we're going to head out. Elizabeth, do you want to?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I heard it. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Okay, so we're just trying to get one last question in about, okay, for on a subscription basis, when you're subscribing to a community solar farm, you are buying a certain size of a system. And so you're getting a various kilowatt hours different in the summertime versus the winter time. And so what happens if you're using more than,
More or less?
yeah, more or less. Do you are you paying that flat fee for the community solar?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the community solar subscription credits are good for a year. And so a lot of the time they will give you extra in the summer to use in the winter when when we're using more, right? It's dark at 4 o'clock here in Maine and we're making cookies, whatever. So they tend to look at your usage over the course of the year, which they will just look at your straight up CMP bill with you. They don't have any like magic technology for this, but they basically, take a look at that and then they decide on your subscription size based on your usage, which can be a little bit problematic for folks. Like if you have a couple of teenagers at home and then a couple of years later, they're both in college and all of a sudden you're using half as much electricity, all of a sudden you'll get oversubscribed, right? And so you do need to talk to your, subscription solar company and ask them to reduce your allocation of solar credit. Or if you decide to start gardening and you've got a bunch of grow lights in your basement, all of a sudden starting all your basil plants, like all of a sudden you're using way more electricity, then you would want to talk to your subscription solar company and increase how many credits you're getting so that you're covering your usage, because you don't want to be paying $200 to CMP and $200 to your subscription solar company. You're not going to see the savings that way.
So it's all over the course of a year. And so if you're producing more in the summertime, then if you are using more in the wintertime, then your solar's producing, you could use those credits from the summertime to do it. At the end of the year, though, if you paid more than you actually used, then you would give up those credits. Yeah. All right, I think that is probably it for tonight. Thank you all so much, both online and here in the room, for coming for this talk. Really appreciate it.